Hello and welcome to the Holographic podcast. I'm your host, Tony, and I'm joined again by my co-host, the amazing Kyle, the salty dog. Kyle, how are you, man?
Pretty good, buddy. Feeling good. Happy it's summer. Just rolling into the warm weather. Plenty to do.
Yes, you know it. All right. Thanks for joining us. And today's show is about how politics suck. So politics suck. That's the name of the show. We all know politics suck, but they are necessary. So we're going to talk about politics, even though they suck. That's what has to happen. If you live on like a commune with like 10 people and you all just kind of decide things, yeah, you might not need politics. Fine, forget it. But when you have giant societies in a world with 7.5 billion people, politics are necessary. And they say politics can be um, an art of compromise, right? And sometimes it appears that politicians do double speak and completely and utterly suck, and sometimes they do. But without that compromise and without that art of politics, it kind of leaves us in a difficult place, and we can't just all go at each other's throats. And kind of right now in the United States of America, we are kind of at each other's throats. And so we need politics to help us get through it, and we need to talk about politics, and that's what we're going to do on this show, right, Kyle?
That's right. I don't think politics suck. I think that they're frustrating. I think it's difficult. I think it's challenging. But I find that of the last 5 years, and anybody that's paid attention to my social media page on Facebook knows that I'm definitely political. And contrary to what other people say, I understand where people level, oh, social media can be really dangerous and bad. And this is 100% true. But if it's used properly, I've actually had some really, really good political and social debates, because I feel like the medium actually allows a slower rollout of ideas where you can collect yourself and put forward good thoughts. The only problem is that most people don't take the time to do it. So yeah, politics suck, but only because people are bad at it. It's like we're not enlightened enough to do it where it doesn't suck. But I think in an ideal world, on paper, it doesn't have to suck. It should be easy or cooperative or collaborative. Anyway.
And I've noticed on those social media pages too, you tend to be very level-headed. Like you purposely don't get into any personal crazy arguments. You just straight up go into the facts, and you maintain that through the entire thing. And I really admire that, because that's very difficult, and you do a good job of that, Kyle.
Thank you. That is generally true. However, full disclaimer, there have been moments where I've said some really, really horrible things. Like anybody in the current Republican Party should be fucking strung up by their boot heels and shot in the back of the head. Murdered, I say. Kill them all. And then I would tend to walk it back,
Right.
No, I do. I try. And I am fallible. I am a human. So things break down. So sometimes I write some stuff that are really incendiary. But for the most part, when people do take a debate with me, I try and maintain its level of civility. I try and put my ideas forward in a way that's not damaging, hurtful, and it's fun, and occasionally we do get someplace. So it's important to keep that in mind. So thank you.
And we'll try and be civil on this show, but Kyle and I can disagree.
You're good, Kyle. Good.
So Kyle and I can disagree, but we try and maintain civility, and we try to think about things logically and critically. And it's okay to have emotions. We're human, we have emotions, but that's what we need more of. Like Kyle said, people are bad at politics. You let your emotions take over, and you let non-factual arguments take over, and it just breaks down. So let's try not to do that. Politics, we've said before on the show, it's necessary to get your opinion out. It's necessary to get your political opinion out. So even though some of us may think politics suck, it's still necessary to discuss them and to discuss our opinions and to talk about what we perceive as the truth. And so we've said it before, if you take a sideline, you're not helping anybody. You're just really hurting the process. You're not promoting moving forward. So moving forward, we have to put our opinion out there. And that's what we're going to do this show. We're going to put our opinions out there and we're going to say some stuff. And you, our listeners may not agree with it. That's fine. Not everybody can agree with everybody, and that's okay. And you put your opinion out too. So that's what we're going to do is we're going to put our opinions out there. And it's going to get heavy. We're going to put some real opinions. We're going to put some real truths on this one. And we're going to use some current events. So we're going to talk about some current events that really tie in politically. There's a lot of crazy current events happening right now, and they all are related to politics. They're all going to tie into politics. So that's what we're going to do. Oh, and real quick, this is also our second bald cast. Welcome to the holographic bald cast. Summertime starting to warm up. We got the old bald cast going.
Yeah, that's why I shaved, because it's warm.
It has nothing to do with zero hair there, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's been about a year since George Floyd was murdered, and there was recently a court case and a conviction where the cop who kneeled on his throat and murdered him was convicted of murder. And that's why I can say murder, because that's now true in a court of law. And this is big politically. So this is a current event, but it's real big into this political discourse of the state of police officers and things like that in this country. I mean, personally, I would say I'm happy with this verdict. I think that this is what needed to happen. Kyle, would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. Very happy. It did need to happen. I think that it's sort of despite it happening, it still speaks volumes that the entire country was collectively holding their breath to find out what the verdict was, despite the fact that we all watched this man murder another man on a video screen.
Right.
So the idea that it could even potentially not have returned a guilty verdict is still that shows that there's still a whole lot of danger, in sort of scaling back or modifying police enforcement and procedure.
A lot of progress to be made. A lot of progress to be made.
Yeah, but it was a really, really big deal. It was a win in terms of sort of a move in the right direction. But yes, it was still, you have to couple that with sort of this idea that, okay, we were all waiting like, okay, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Because we really didn't know.
Right.
Nobody knew.
Could have gone either way. Could have gone either way.
Yeah. So anyway, yes, I'm very happy with the verdict. Sad with the whole scenario, very happy with the verdict.
And this sort of thing is continuing to happen and will continue to happen. And I want to give a little historical perspective of why it's going to continue to happen. So, policing and local police forces in this country are vary, and they're not in a national constitution. There's nothing in the national constitution for local police forces. That's up to local municipalities. It's up to states, but even local municipalities have a lot of leeway. Each locale does it differently. And this is true around the world. How policing works in different countries is so varied. Some countries you have to pay the cops if a cop comes and approaches you, you give them some money and you're good. Other countries, a cop can approach you and may not have a weapon and they're going to talk to you and it's going to be very civil. In this particular country, in the United States, cops tend to be fairly powerful and they tend to be looking for a certain thing. And historically, the reason for that is because a lot of the police forces in this country were organized and stem from Reconstruction, post Civil War. So in the in the early days of the United States, there wasn't really a lot of police forces like we think of. There was local sheriffs, and there were people with badges who were given power to enforce laws, but they really didn't think about getting you for every little thing. They were more peacekeepers, and that's kind of how they thought of themselves. And they weren't large forces. And then the Civil War happened, and slaves were freed. And post Civil War, you had this giant section of the country that lost a bunch of labor and needed to figure out how to gain that labor back. And because of the 14th Amendment, which says people are free except if they break the law, except if they're convicted of a felony, you had this scheme where they would go and they would find these African Americans, freed slaves, and they'd get them on some stupid law that they made in the South, and then they would put them to work because they were convicts. And that's how and I was listening to this historian that was talking exactly about how this went down. And so this is historical fact that police forces grew up in this country to gather people to who broke small laws and then make them into slave labor. And it kind of and that template kind of went around the entire country, even in the North and even in the West, where there wasn't as many slaves. The template went around because it worked for the people in charge. It worked well for the high ups.
Yeah, even like a watered down, version of that. So yeah, you're saying, basically they were white slave patrols, more or
Right.
less.
More or
They're
less.
put in charge of rounding up quote unquote free black people, men mostly, and putting them back into indentured servitude. But
Exactly.
even an extension of that, it's all very racially charged, and this is sort of tying in. This eventually will tie into the Chauvin and George Floyd thing. But even outside the South, where they weren't being really necessarily rounded up in slave patrols, one of the early things that cops that police do is they pull you over in your car.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And that's one way that they can really get their sort of their teeth into you. That was sort of a racially charged thing, but now that I'm putting it through,
Well, I think it's racially charged because as you look at statistics, you're statistically more likely to be pulled over if you're a particular race. You're more likely to be pulled over if you're Black, and you're more likely to be pulled over if you're Hispanic, and you're less likely to be pulled over if you're white.
exactly. So right. And so my point was is that even in the North here, what the police would do is they would automatically pull over a black motorist
Right.
and try and charge them. This is something that I recently read. That was sort of how and obviously it's extended since then. Now, you are more likely to get pulled over. But still it has extended outside of that racially sort of charged sort of stereotyping to basically involve everybody. But the laws are still the system is still set up in such a way that that's one of the ways that they can sort of basically take people that are sort of minding their own business and create it's almost like they're a solution looking for a problem in many
Exactly.
cases. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's a huge revenue maker.
Exactly.
That's what they do. Modern police work is oftentimes it's their highway patrols.
Absolutely. And so that's what happened is you have this basic template that happened in the Reconstruction era. It's moved to modern times in the exact same template, in the exact same paradigm, where you have police officers going after low-level offenders for revenue, for slave labor, for all these types of things that aren't just. They aren't necessarily keeping the peace. They aren't necessarily the right thing to do. It's just this is the paradigm that our police force has moved into. And so yeah, absolutely, it doesn't necessarily matter if you're what race you are. It does kind of matter what how rich or poor you are. It seems like rich people don't get a don't um attract this sort of police attention, and that's from that template, looking for poor people no matter what race you are, so they can make money off of you, so they can use you in the court system. And this is what it's turned into. And on this show we like to talk about looking at things from a deeper level. So if you look at police officers and you say, hey, you know what, you can't blame cops, and I really like cops and they're just trying to do their job. Yes, there is a I see your point, that there are police officers who are just trying to do their job, but the reason it's a problem is because they're not trying to do a just job. They've been put in this situation where they're doing a job in a particular paradigm that is unjust, that is approaching,
Unjust.
it's an unjust paradigm, it's an unjust template from the Reconstruction era. And so look at things deeper. If you like cops, great, there are certainly some good cops, but why are they doing the things they're doing? Because they're put in this position. And this is what we talk about, this is what people talk about when they say defund the cops. I know it's a blanket statement that doesn't make a lot of sense, but what it really means is change the policing system. And so that's what I want to see. That's what I think needs to happen, is the policing system needs to change and get out of that particular paradigm of looking at low level offenders. Like Kyle said, they just pull people over for revenue. I mean, in these modern times, can't you just take a picture of a license plate and send a ticket? Can't you just, there's so many other ways to deal with traffic offenses than to have these heavily armed guys pull you over. There's so many other ways to deal with that, but
Hmm.
that's what we're stuck in, and it just is completely unnecessary.
Hmm.
So that's what I would like to see. That's my opinion, is yes, it's not just about defunding police, it's about changing the way that police operate, changing the way how, and some cities are doing this and they're having good results. You send mental health care workers to people having mental health crises. You send different workers for domestic violence. You send different people for different things. Traffic offenses shouldn't even be approached by heavily armed police officers. But yeah, you need police officers in some instances, but you don't in many instances.
Yeah, well, I mean, couple things. One, the whole defund the police, it was just a really, really horrible choice of titling.
Right.
It's like they should change it to refund the police.
Right.
Like refund the police, reappropriate funds to steer, towards other things. And the other part of that is that people don't understand when they hear defund the police, they say, oh, they're going to take away critical materials and all this training. No, really, the whole point is to actually add materials and training in the form of less in the form of heavy artillery, battering rams, and SWAT related gear, which is that's a major problem, which is the militarization of municipal police forces has been going on for 2 decades now. Where they basically you're looking at the same type of equipment that the army has, police departments now have, tanks and sort of incendiary bombs and all this other stuff for breaking down doors, riot gear. Less of that and more training. And I don't mean just like another month or two in the academy. I want to see deep psychological training. I want to see academic work. I think that to be a police officer, you should have a minimum. I think it should be a 4-year degree. Let's just half of that and say you need an associate's degree. You know what I mean? In in psychology or criminal procedure or any of these other things that have a strong human related component. And then people say, well, why are you going to do that? For such low money, it's that they don't get paid. Increase the pay. You know, it's a hard job. It requires a lot of skill, and or if done in the way that Tony and I want it to be done, it requires a lot of skill, a lot of nuance, a lot of reading people, less more carrot, less stick, let's say. Okay. And I think that education is directly tied into that. And on top of that, they should also increase the pay. It should be a big balloon job. The officers should be paid more, they should be trained better, and a whole lot of other things will click into place.
I mean,
I think if you see those two things happening.
absolutely. From what I've seen, the pay's not that bad, and I think it varies, but
Yeah.
it's but I agree with you. And I think across the board, the pay should be increasing for things like that. And I don't understand why a job like that doesn't have more ongoing training in many areas that require skills of that nature. You have to go through certifications all the time and keep learning and keep doing things. And from
Teachers.
yeah, teachers, but just so many technical jobs. And I think that's a very technical job. It's technically difficult with individuals. It's technically difficult dealing with, psychology, like you said. And so it seems to me that a lot of the technical stuff they have to deal with is just weaponry. It's like, oh, you get certified for this weaponry and you're good to go. And there's so many aspects of it that I think they need to be continue to be, like you said, educated throughout the job. And then if that means then they get more money, that's absolutely what should happen. I completely
Mhm.
agree with you.
And also, community policing is another part of that.
Right.
You shouldn't work in a district. You shouldn't be from a nice part of the of town and work in a shitty part of the town.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think cops should be very, very much involved in their communities. I think they should be part and parcel of where they live so that they get to know people a little bit better. I mean, what we're saying here is not like this isn't anything radical. This isn't new. It's just these are ideas that have not been implemented because of this really, really entrenched system that we're working against, that the cops are working in. Also because of this, like, this blue brotherhood or fraternity. They have there's a certain level of police omerta, where they don't say anything against their brothers and sisters because, there's
That's a
like,
big,
it's
that's
a
big.
huge, huge deal.
That's a big
And
deal.
that's what we need to pull that down like immediately.
Yeah.
Um, because man, who's going to police the police? Who's going to police the police?
Yeah. I mean,
Luckily now, with the one thing that's actually happening that gives me a certain level of hope, and the reason why this is all happening is because of the technology that we're using right now.
right.
All these handheld devices and transparency, it's going right out, right into the mainstream. It's accessible to everybody. So all of a sudden, it's all very transparent.
Right. And that's the thing, is these types of things and this type of inequality and this type of policing isn't new. It's just being recorded more.
Exactly.
It's kind of coming out into the light. And so, and it's going to have to change. I mean, these guys are going to have to change because technology is just going to get better with this sort of thing. And they can't keep doing the same deal because the shit's going to hit the fan. And it's hitting the
It
fan.
is. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like you said, like, living in a upscale neighborhood and policing, a lower income neighborhood, this has to do with so much inequality in this culture. And that's a rabbit hole I don't want to get down because we don't have the time right now. But, it really has to, policing is so intertwined with socio-political economic issues. And so it's not a cut and dry issue. It's not like you can just say cops are good and cops are bad. I like cops, I don't like cops. It's not that easy. So if we examine these really difficult intertwined socioeconomic political issues, we discover that this is a problem from the past. It's a problem going to be in the future. It's relating to inequalities in our culture. So this is something we have to tackle. And
Yeah.
this is something that we have to take ownership of, as like Kyle and I, as white men, we're going to have to stand up and say, hey, look, this is wrong and this needs to change.
Yeah, and I know we don't want to stay on this forever. It's just there's so much to talk about, but like you said, it doesn't. These things don't exist in a vacuum. So sometimes I hear if I start talking with somebody about this, people are just well, why don't they just do what the cops say? Just if you just don't break the law, then you're fine. Well, okay, yeah, that's true, but this poor person was starving. You know what I mean? And that doesn't make it right to rob somebody, but there are instances where people are they're forced into certain scenarios based on, like Tony was saying, socioeconomic pressures. So to say that, oh, it's just so simple to just be a 100% perfect citizen all the time is just not really, you're not really holding on to anything real there. You have to look at a bigger picture. You have to look at the systems that are in place to keep these people sort of down. And so anybody that says, well, it's just so easy, you just have to do what they say every time, which is true, but also, hey, that doesn't work. Look at Philando Castile. He was doing exactly what he was supposed to do and he got shot, you know so it's just people oftentimes offer these very simplistic solutions, and I think that that's not really fair. That's not what we do on this show. And a lot of times that's why sort of sometimes we go into these crazy tangents, because it's so easy to do, because these
Absolutely.
problems are so, well, they're not insurmountable, but
Right.
they're big, and we have to start pulling them down brick by brick.
And to further your point, another brick in that wall is, when people say that sort of thing, like, well, why don't they just follow the law or comply? Okay, let's look at actual theft. So wage theft is higher by, it's like 4 to 1 to petty theft. In other words, giant corporations have stolen more money from workers 4 times the amount of petty theft, or embezzlement. It's 10 to 1 for any sort of armed robbery. In other words, there's so much money being stolen from the upper echelon of society. Now, did they follow the law? Did they do the right thing? But why aren't they being pushed down and killed and sent to jail? Guess what? They're not. So it's
Mm.
not. So if you talk about right and wrong, okay, well, the wrong part of society is doing some wrong stuff and they are not being policed. They're not being approached and put in jail, even though they're stealing 10 times the amount of money according to statistics. And
Right.
so it's not that cut and dry.
But we all watched Eric Garner die from a chokehold because he was selling Lucy's on the corner, which
Right.
is technically illegal.
Right.
Sell cigarettes on the corner for 25 cents.
Right.
But honestly, who gives a shit?
Who gives a shit? That's the thing. That's what we're saying, is that that sort of thing should be approached not by these heavily armed guys. They should go into these commodity traders and arrest these dudes embezzling. They should go into these corporations and arrest these dudes who are taking money from. Why aren't they doing that? And I'll tell you exactly why. Is because the system was set up to go after the low level people for the justice system to get slave labor and to get money. And that's why it was set up. That's the truth. So don't tell me. So when people say this crap about just follow the law and this is right or wrong, no, you don't know. Right or wrong is much bigger than that, buddy. There is a big wrong in society that is not being approached, and that's the way
And,
the system is set up.
and the law is also written in favor of
Right.
it's like, so wage theft is real, but a lot of times what they're doing is legal.
They get around it. Right. They get
They can
around it.
get around it. There's loopholes. I mean,
Well,
I work for a company that doesn't have to give OT to part-time employees.
right. Ridiculous.
You
Well,
know,
and a
so
lot
it's
of
like,
it, like it
I could
is,
put in 50 hours a week in those 10 hours. It doesn't matter because I'm only seasonal.
and a lot of it, like it really is a big law breaking. A lot, like from what I've read, there's a big breaking of the law there, but they just pay a fine, or they just go through this
You know,
process where they mitigate a little bit. So they are really breaking a serious law, but they just pay a fine and they're good. and
Mhm.
there's no one approaching them. There's no one really policing that aspect. So I think that's pretty serious. It's just not, it's just doesn't, no one cares. All right. Well, I think we've let our opinion out about what's going on here. So let's move on to something else pretty crazy. So so the next big thing that's happening, in my opinion, right now is things relating to the 2020 election. And there's a segment of society that believes that Joe Biden did not win, that Trump won. They believe that the election was rigged. Uh, a lot of people are calling this the big lie because, frankly, it is a big lie. And and this is leading to laws being made around in mostly red states that are suppressing votes. This is being led to more gerrymandering. This is a very complicated issue. It's a very difficult issue, but it really is, in my opinion, a giant stake in the heart of democracy. Like, this is really going to lead to some bad stuff if this continues. Now, I also just read a statistic here, and I'm pretty sure this sounds pretty accurate. So if they say, oh, a little over 50% of Republicans believe that Trump won the 2020 election, but if there's only about 26% of the voting population was Republican, that narrows it down to a little over, or a little around 14%. So only about 14% of the population believe this big lie. So it's not a giant part, but the problem is that it's an extreme part. So a lot of these extremists and a lot of these extreme lawmakers, even though they're a small percentage of the population, are pushing this narrative and are pushing voter suppression. So the reason that this is so insidious and the reason this is so horrible is because, let me lay it down for you, because the 2020 election, which was shown by the courts, which was shown by independent observers, which was shown by both sides, Republican counters, Democratic counters, people across the board said, hey, look, this is a really fair election. A lot of people turned out. We watched everything close. There wasn't any fraud. Like literally in the tens, maybe even less, maybe less than 10 cases of fraud that they can prove. A lot of them were mistakes. Some of them were one of, I just read one guy, this guy, his wife died and he went and voted for Trump with her. Like 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 cases of fraud in this country are extremely low. There is no crazy voter fraud. It's been proven factually that this isn't the case. But because you have the psychopath Trump saying again and again that it was fraud, you have people in his cult of personality listening to this, and then it's perpetuating. And what's happening is Republican lawmakers are using this as an issue to create voter suppression laws. They know, these guys in these legislatures and these state legislatures know this is bullshit. They know it's not true, but they're using it to create laws. And their laws they're creating are the reality is, the truth is, those laws being created suppress votes. They stop people from voting for a variety of reasons. They close polling stations. They require unnecessary hurdles to get IDs, and then you need IDs. They limit the times you can vote. They're doing everything they possibly can to reduce voting in poor and minority populations, which tend to vote against them. And so you have a lie that's then creating the truth on the other side. So you have people saying there's problems with voting, and they're using that to create problems with voting. So this is the truth. Can you see this? That they're using this BS to create problems with voting. They're saying this was a problem with voting. Let's use it to create problems with voting. That's why it makes me angry so much. That's why it like pisses me off, is because people can't see that. Like, you can't see what this is doing. This is a lie to actually suppress the vote, to actually make voting harder. This is one of the most frustrating issues with me, because I don't get that people can't see that truth.
Not only can they not see it, they're just, or they're choosing not to see it. But it's not like this is a brand new thing either.
Right.
This is an old issue. And sadly, the Republicans, they're taking this play, and they realize that this might be the only way that they can hold on to things
Right.
currently.
Right.
It's outrageous. I mean, and there are some really, really simple ways to get around it. I mean, why don't we automatically enroll people, registered people to vote? When, like, so say, like, I mean, when men have to register for selective service, why don't they just automatically get involved in the vote? When you get a driver's license, why don't you automatically get a voter registration card? You know what I mean? Why isn't there more funds appropriated to go through voter rolls, year by year? If there's really a problem, which you and I just discussed, there's not. But if other people think that there is, why don't they, instead of making it harder, why don't they just make it better? You know what I mean? Like, there are people that probably would volunteer to do something like not purge the rolls so much as just look at the rolls, you know what I mean? And verify independently whether or not these people still live in town. I never really understood it. I know that voting here in my little Vermont hometown is very easy. It's totally approachable, it's manageable. But that doesn't happen everywhere, and it's sad when they close these stations and people that don't have their own car can't go to these places, or there's a line and they have to wait in the blazing Georgia sun for 3 hours to go and vote. It's outrageous, completely outrageous.
Well, here in Colorado, so we're a all mail-in voting system, and it's been like that for years. And so there's this idea that mail-in voting can easily be frauded or changed, and that's simply not true. Here's the truth. The truth is that the mail-in ballots have a barcode. They have a signature. They have information on them. Every single mail-in ballot it's a paper trail that's easily verified and difficult to fraud. And that's the truth. And so when someone says, no, it's just a letter, no, it doesn't work like that. It's got a barcode. It has technology that is difficult to fraud. And there's very, 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 very almost zero cases of mail-in fraud in Colorado. We've done it for many years now, and it works really well. And everybody gets a ballot. Everybody gets a mail-in ballot. It works fantastic. So there's so many different ways to do this. Now, why isn't it being done? Kyle, you said, why isn't it being done? It's not being done because they're suppressing votes, because they know, like you just said, the right knows that if this is done easily, they're going to get less votes because there's going to be more people voting against them. And so this is happening. This has been happening for a while. So the answer to your question is, why isn't this being done when it's so easy that it can be done? Because they don't want to lose their power. And that's also, when you look deep at this, is exactly what's happening. There's a segment of our political system, which right now is the Republican right, that knows that if more votes happen, they're going to lose more power. And instead of changing their ideas and changing their platforms, they're just going to rig the system. They're just going to get less
Yeah.
people to vote.
And why is gerrymandering still legal?
Right.
How has that not been outlawed? It's like,
So ridiculous.
anybody that takes a look at the way it's broken down, somebody's like, oh, what's gerrymandering? And then you start to show them the way the blocks work and how it's manipulative and how it takes something that is fair and turns it into unfair. You know what I mean? That's like starting a Monopoly game with one person having, houses and hotels already. How is it even? It's not even remotely fair. And yet it's still legal. They're starting to get around to sort of taking it apart, I think, or I've heard it's always being talked about. And yet I don't think that it's been dismantled. So it's like, it just makes you wonder, you know, why these things have stayed in place, and how, even during the times, and for being as political as I am, I really don't have much in the way of recall, so I'm not really good factually, but like, one would figure that within the last 20 years the Democrats were in charge at some point. Why didn't they dismantle it then?
So So just to be clear too, people say, oh man, you're really shitting on the Republican right now. Hey, you know what? Kyle and I both shit on the Democratic left all the time. So I think the difference is that we can look at the Democratic Party and say there's a lot of problems and this sucks and they're doing a horrible job with this. And one of the things is fixing gerrymandering, and one of the things is gerrymandering also. Democrats gerrymander plenty of stuff. I've looked at the numbers, and there's a lot of Democratic gerrymandering too. So I'm not just being polarized here. I'm not just shitting on one party, but I am shitting on the Republican right because they are exactly voter suppressing right now. The Democrats are not voter suppressing. The Republicans are voter suppressing. So both parties are not the same in this aspect. Let's be clear. Let's be honest. Republicans suppress votes, are destroying democracy with this. Boom. But do Democrats gerrymander? Absolutely. Should that change? Absolutely. Now, statistically and honestly, if all gerrymandering was eliminated tomorrow, Republicans would lose seats because there are more Republican, I was just studying this, there are more Republican gerrymandered districts than Democratic districts. So Republicans would lose a lot of seats, both state legislature and national legislature. The Republicans would lose seats. That's why gerrymandering hasn't been eliminated tomorrow. But there are certainly big Democratic gerrymandered districts. It's just statistically, it's lower than Republican ones. And so one of the problems with Democrats is that they are controlled by a lot of corporate interests. They are ineffectual moderates. And so when it comes to issues like this that should change, then they get nothing done. And that pisses me off. And that's a thing that is completely asinine about the Democratic Party. So we're not just shitting on one party here, but we're being clear about right or wrong. We're being clear about they're not the same.
Yeah.
Don't fall into that trap politically. Don't fall into the political trap of saying, well, both they're the same. No, look at the differences, decide which is better, and make your choice.
And also, like, you know, because this is a show about politics, they're neither one of them are moving in a direction, a progressive direction, fast enough for Tony or myself.
Right.
I mean, both of them are protecting really, really unjust, outdated, and significantly large and entrenched systems of governance, economics, justice, you know, just political systems themselves. Like, I mean, we've said this on this show before. We're a nation of over 300 million people. Are we up to we're 350,
I think it's
330?
around 350. Yeah, I think it's 350. Yeah.
And yet everybody has to fall into one of these two political parties. Like, it's not realistic. And neither one of those parties are pushing towards the things that really need doing. Neither one of them are willing to upset the apple cart. And that's really, the whole thing needs to be upended.
Right.
You know, I don't want to see a systems breakdown like Tone Sr. You know, I don't want to see, I do not want to see revolution, but I do want to see some radical maneuvers. I want to see people moving rapidly towards dismantling some of these ways of working our nation. You know what I mean? You know, regardless of the fact that they're going to lose votes. It's like we elect these people, but they're still very you know, it's like they're sort of milk toast. It's like the water isn't cold or hot. It's just tepid. It's lukewarm.
I think, and it's been said in some media, you know, this cult of personality, people are following a certain Trump train, and that happens on the Democrat side too. And that's part of the problem here is that it's been mattering less and less right or wrong. It's mattering less and less what's good for the populace and for progress. And it's mattering more what to toe the party line and to do what you're told and to make that corporate money. And that's a big problem. Now, in my opinion, it's a bigger problem on the Republican side right now because they're literally just completely and utterly lying and going
There's no
nuts.
comparison.
There's no comparison. They're lying and they're going nuts for to follow this party line. Now, do Democrats do that to get their corporate interests? Yeah, but but if you look at state legislatures, it's not even close. It's not even close to what's going on. Like,
Yeah, and to be fair, okay, so let's shit on everybody, okay? The Republicans are currently punishing Liz Cheney for jumping out of line and pushing back against the big lie and, basically Trumpism. And the Democrats are hailing her as a hero, and she's sticking, she's holding fast to her morals and to her values. She voted for Trump policy like 93% of the time.
she's more
She's a
conservative than her replacement.
viciously,
She's more
what's that?
conservative than her replacement.
She's a viciously close-minded,
Yeah.
gay, conservative. It's like I don't understand people like that. I mean, if there's the Trump should be out of politics. Cheney's should also be out of politics.
Right.
Okay. And I said that, like, I didn't say gay is a bad thing. I just think it's interesting. She's voting. She is gay, and yet she votes for conservative motions all the time. It's like, I don't know how these people live with themselves. I'm flawed. Okay. But at least I'm consistent. I don't live one way and vote another way. You know what I mean? I live and vote the same way. Like so it's like, I don't understand how they can, and how these people act and work in the way they do, and how the Democrats can actually champion this woman who has voted for all of the things that they're, against. So yeah, it's just it's really frustrating.
It's frustrating. It's craziness, and frankly, it is craziness right now with that sort of thing. Because you're right, there you have this woman, Liz Cheney, who is very conservative. The woman they want to replace her with had voted less conservatively, but the only reason they're replacing her is because she spoke out against the big lie. And so and then you're right, and then the Democrats are like, yay, like, see, she's amazing. Like, no, she's not amazing. Stop saying. And so you have one side that is acting like a child. The Republicans are acting like hurt children, like, we didn't get our way, so no one can have it. So no, it's all a lie. No, it's not. And then you have the other side that are like, no, see, she said it, and so she's good now. Yay. Like, they're just freaking children. Like, my 5-year-old has more sense than them. And that's what's happening.
Everything is happening strictly at face value. It's like, yeah,
it's ridiculous.
So the big lie.
Sucks.
Are we done with that?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I think we've laid it out on the table. I think I've said my opinion straight up. I've laid it right on the table. So I don't know. What, do you have anything else to say about it?
I don't know. No. I can't believe that people are still doing it. And also it's actually, the timing of this is quite poignant, because I'm starting to see Trump 2024 banners go up.
Right.
And he was gloriously out of the news for a while. And he's starting to sort of filter back in. I guess he's going to get ready to roll out his, like, TV show or channel or something like that. And it's amazing to me that people are putting forward certain political entities. It's one thing to sort of hold to traditional values, but it's another thing to hold true to traditional values while actively shitting on people that aren't hurting anybody. You know what I mean? Yeah, I can't.
I think what you're saying is that it, if you have conservative traditional ideology, that's okay. But if you're doing the opposite, and if you're voting for people who are literally doing the opposite,
yeah,
that's not okay.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me, so the art of politics. So I'm going to give conservatives a little hint here that they're not going to take, because the people in charge are morons. But if you're conservative and you have conservative ideology and you want to actually go forward with a certain agenda, you would dump Trump like so fast right now. You would get someone smart and intelligent who wants to do a certain conservative agenda, and they would have a real good chance of taking power in 2024. But instead, they're sticking with this guy Trump, who is so good at getting the other side to vote against him. He's so good at getting so many people in this country to come out to vote against him, and they're going to lose big. And so it's so obvious to me that, like, okay, yeah, duh, if you're conservative, you dump him like a bad habit and you go with someone smarter, and then you have a fighting chance. But they're doing the opposite. They're sticking with him and his dumb ideology. And now and they know, and that's why they're doing these voter suppression, because they know the only chance they have of winning at all is to suppress votes, because so many people want to come out and vote against this guy. And so politically, from a neutral standpoint, it's like shooting yourself in the foot, but that's why they're doing voter suppression, because they know that they're shooting themselves in the foot. It's a very strange time. It's a very strange dynamic. I don't know. Whatever. Whatever.
It also parallels really nicely with the long history of anti-intellectualism in this country.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
tied in, and I think we've talked about that briefly on this show before too. It's
Yeah.
just it's not cool to be informed. It's not cool to take a deeper look.
Right.
It's not cool to have debate. You just have to be polarized.
Right.
This is what I stand for. This is what I'm about. If you don't like it, you can leave. Okay. Well, no, because I live here too. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense.
Nope. Don't make no sense, man. Don't make no sense, man. So, all right. Well, we've got our opinion out with that sort of thing. I had one more thing I want to discuss, is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And even some people would say don't even call it a conflict, like it's just kind of Israelis doing some nasty stuff. So right there, you just saw part of my opinion. Keep in mind, Kyle Saltzman is a Jew. Even though I have an Italian last name, most of my ancestry is Jewish. So we can talk some shit about Israel because we are Jewish. When I was a kid and people knew I was Jewish, I got anti-Semitic stuff. I got teased. I heard anti-Semitic stuff. I would get in fights over anti-Semitic stuff. So as Jews, we deal with this anti-Semitic stuff a lot. But this particular issue, Israel doing a lot of crazy stuff, it's some serious business, and the United States is deeply involved. So let's talk about it for a few minutes. We don't have to talk about it to death, but let's talk about it for a few minutes. Kyle, how do you feel about this as a Jew?
I feel terrible, just as a Jew and as a person. I mean, I've long thought that what's going on over there is tragic. There is fault on both sides, but it's not an equal sort of scenario. I definitely, I feel that even though I am Zionist to a degree. Like, I feel like Israel should be a nation, and I feel like the Jews should have a homeland. It's way too complicated of an affair, and the way that it all happened and went down is significantly unjust. And what's going on now is 100% wrong. And I'll start by saying, yes, there's wrongdoing on both sides, but yeah, Israel has definitely not made really wise decisions in terms of keeping things off the boil, let's say. It's a really charged situation over there, and I don't believe that they have approached it with the right thought and candor. So I mean, we're gonna have to unpack this, because there's like people will be like, well, you know, you shoot a rocket at the country, of course. And our own country is saying Israel has the right to defend themselves. Israel has the right to defend themselves. Well, you know, in some ways, we can unpack it in so many different ways. But if you back a wild animal into a corner and it bites you, you shouldn't be surprised or angry that you get bit. You know what I mean? Like, I know that's a simplistic way of putting it. But I definitely, yeah, I think that Israel is definitely, they're doing some really terrible things over there. Um, that being said, Hamas is a terrorist organization, and they don't believe that Israel should exist at all. And that's not okay either. But you know, the poor people in Gaza, are really, really suffering, and I believe perhaps needlessly. I believe that they're suffering perhaps needlessly.
Yeah, I mean, well, first let me say that, you know, the United States is involved with this because the United States gives our tax dollars go to a lot of tax dollars go to Israel, and a lot of that money is used for military purposes. We send a lot of weapons. That's a giant issue in the United States. Weapons production, sending weapons throughout the world. So our hands are dirty. As Americans, our hands are dirty. So, you know, who you vote for and what happens is a problem. Right now, Biden is okay with what's going on over there. And so we're not going to be like, yay, Biden, whatever he does, yay, like people say to Trump. No, he's fucking up. Biden, you're fucking up in this point, in this aspect. Biden's doing some fucking stupid shit. He thinks that excuse me. You know, a lot of the Democrats think that they can just let this keep going on, and it's going to bite them in the ass. So that's a problem. So I like to put things in analogies. Excuse me, having some allergies. So, and some people don't like my analogies. That's fine. But here's my analogy for this one. In this particular situation, you have this big 300-pound MMA fighter who can kick ass, and you have a skinny short dude who cannot kick ass, and the skinny short dude says to the MMA fighter, I think you're a piece of shit and I think you should not exist. And then MMA fighter says, all right, whatever. And the guy throws a rock at him and it bounces off, and or maybe cuts him a little bit with a knife, cuts the guy in a knife. And the MMA fighter goes and breaks both of his arms and smashes his nose in. And so this is basically what's happening, is that you have people with very little power, even though they're saying and doing something which is wrong, which is saying you should not exist, Israel. Israel is taking their power and they're killing a lot of people. They're killing a lot of innocent people, and they're doing a lot of things. So I'm using this analogy because in reality, when you have power and when you have advanced weaponry and you use it to kill and to maim and to not pay attention to innocent civilians, that's wrong. Doesn't matter what the other side says, that's what you're doing is also wrong. And so Israel also has this technology. I don't know if you know, do you know their Iron Dome technology, where, you know, Hamas launches some rockets and Iron Dome gets rid of most of it. So most of the stuff being launched by Hamas is actually being stopped by Iron Dome. There's a few getting through, and Israel's basically fucking them up real bad, like real bad. And it's just wrong. And so and there's nothing that we can say right now, and there's nothing that we can do right now that's going to change this, but it's important that our opinion gets out as Jewish people, as people with Jewish ancestry, that, you know, killing innocent people is just perpetuating this thing that is wrong. And so it's just, I don't know, it's, man, I don't know what to do. Like, you know, it's disheartening. Like when you think of like the history of Jewish people, how much killing has been going on, and then Israel chooses to do this sort of thing. Like it's kind of sad. It's sad to me. It's wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I 100% agree. And, you know, they really don't have that much moral high ground to stand on either. You
Right.
know, they've consistently broken their own sort of agreements and rules in pushing Israeli settlements outside of the, you know, borders or boundaries that they themselves set consistently for decades and decades and decades. Not to mention the whole story of just how it all began. Like, I mean, sure, it seemed reasonable that, Holocaust survivors and Jews coming back from, wherever they were in the 40s did deserve a homeland, and they carved out a spot for themselves with plenty of international help. The British were involved, and everything got cut up into pieces in ways that really just were not necessarily just to the people that had already been occupying there. And then you go further back, and it's like it's just you can kind of keep on going further back, and there's a different story every decade, every half century, every century, for thousands of years. So it's just a very, very challenging situation. But the current Israeli regime needs to, I believe they need to change.
Yeah.
And I believe they need to figure out a way to accommodate the Palestinian people and the situation. I mean, there are people without a country, and they don't have representation in any way, and yet they are actually a cultural and national entity. And they're suffering. Innocent people are suffering. So it's just I don't have the ability or the knowledge to dissect it too deeply. I just know that what's going on there is tragic and wrong.
I think that's one of the problems too, is I think very few people have the ability or knowledge to really dissect it. Like, not just you and me, but people in charge. Like, the people in charge and the people who are actually making those decisions, they don't have the ability to really understand. They just want to go, and and it's like, it's a really, really complicated thing. But I'm going to boil it down to something simple that I think ties politically. The show Politics Sucks. Well, politically, one of the problems is weapons. One of the problems is war. And so we're in this kind of human history right now. Human thought is that, oh, if there's a problem, we go to war. If there's a problem, we get more weapons. And I just think that that's not gonna work. It's not working, and it will continue to not work. And the reason is because as you look at nature, you can't fight fire with fire. Adding fire to fire just makes more fire. So what do you put on fire to put it out? You put water. And so as fire is very hot and very what's the word I'm looking for? Fire goes into you, right? It expands. Water is yielding. Water can yield and become soft. Now, if water crashes, it can be hard, and water slowly destroys over time, but water is a yielding element and fire is a destroying element. And so I'm just saying that that it's time to look at things from a different perspective, that maybe the answer is to make less weapons and to make less war and to start being more yielding. And I know that that's not going to happen immediately, especially like Kyle said, with the current Israeli regime and the current United States regime. It's not going to happen, but that's what needs to happen, is people need to start fighting fire with water and to start yielding a little bit. And to start yielding doesn't mean giving up, and yielding doesn't mean saying you can do whatever you want. Water doesn't let anything do whatever it wants. It's just putting out the fire and moving forward in a manner where the wood can survive and not burn, and the water can also move forward. So I'm just saying that that creating more weapons and creating more war is just not working. And straight up, the truth is, people who were terrorists, people in Hamas, we're not eliminating them, we're making more of them. These kids that are surviving are like, I hate Israel really bad now. I really hate Jews even more. It's what America has done. People around the world who hate America, it's not they hate us. They don't hate us because we're awesome. They hate us because we bomb the shit out of them. And this is
Hmm.
and this is will continue to happen. People hate you when you bomb the shit out of them. Sorry, it's the truth. So we bomb the shit out of people and they're gonna hate us. So Israel can bomb the shit out of some more people, and I tell you what, they're gonna hate them even more. I'm sorry, man. It's just the truth. And it's just that's moving forward. You can't bomb the shit out of someone and be like, well, I'm bombing every single person. There's a lot of people. You're
Yeah.
not going to be able to bomb them all. They're just going to hate you even more. It's just going to create more conflict. So at some point, I'm hoping humans are going to move forward, but we'll see, right? I don't know.
Not an easy one. I mean, I would add something, but I don't know. I don't even know what to add. You know, it's just it's just a difficult, challenging situation.
Totally difficult,
And
challenging,
people are dying.
and people are dying. Oish. So, oish. So okay, well, that's where we're gonna cut off. That's where we're gonna cut it off. We are gonna do 80s movies wisdom. We'll do it fairly briefly. That was our political show. We have some serious, strong political opinions, but don't get us wrong. We're not saying one political side is better than the other political side, but it's important to question and to criticize whatever political side is doing some messed up stuff. So that's what we've done. We've criticized and we talked about some messed up stuff politically. And so we want to move forward, but I don't know what's going to happen right now. So let's do our 80s movies wisdom. So 80s movies wisdom, we got the movie Trading Places, early 80s, Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy, really funny movie. It's about these two dudes, one's rich and one's poor, and they end up trading places. So at one point, a couple of these rich dudes are trying to explain to Eddie Murphy's character, who lived on the streets, about commodities trading, which I actually shot on earlier in the show. And they're telling him about commodities trading, and he looks at these two rich white dudes, and he says, "Sounds to me like you guys are a couple of bookies." And they're like, "See, I told you he understood." And that's the quote. So what's the 80s movies wisdom? The 80s movies wisdom is that wealth creates wealth. Hard work doesn't create wealth. Now, how did I get that from that quote? Because these rich dudes who are commodities traders are bookies, basically. I mean, and like Wall Street, if you look at Wall Street and like the formulas of Wall Street, like it's a criminal enterprise, basically. Like it's just taking people's money and creating more money and then taking the money and not giving them money. Like it's really fucked up. And so you have people on the street who are selling Lucy cigarettes, or you have people on the street who are bookies. You have poor people who are doing the exact same thing. Well, what's the difference? Do poor people work hard and they make a bunch of money? No, it's not hard work. It's because the rich people came from wealth. There's a certain amount of wealth in this country. And again, the statistics back me up. Do the research, check it out. I was checking it out. The wealth in this country perpetuates wealth. Very few people can get to that point from nothing. They get to that point because they have wealth. You say, well, Bill Gates did it and Elon Musk and blah, everyone's talking about these assholes. These guys come from wealth, man. Check out their backgrounds. I think Musk's family was diamond mines and Gates got a couple $100,000, and these guys get wealth from wealth. Can you work hard and completely become self-made? Yeah, I guess it's possible. But if you look deeply into it, they almost all of them have a backing from something else. And that's on purpose. That's on purpose. That's the system that has been created in this country, is that if you come from nothing, you're going to continue to be nothing because that's the way they want you to be. And if you come from something, then you can use that something to create more wealth. All right.
So you're saying the American dream is a lie?
Yes.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, you're right. It is. I mean, there are plenty of examples of people that have worked hard and come from nothing. You say there's very few. I would counter that. There's a lot of them, but you are 100% right in saying that wealth begets wealth, and that it's the again, here we go back into systems. Our systems are set up so that those people have an unfair advantage,
Right.
always and across the board. I mean, even just look at the way retail works. You know, it's like we give discounts to the people that can afford the highest price commodities. You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. But, you know, in some of my own work related experience, the people that come through that are regular or potentially regular customers who have second homes and, you know, all of these other things, they're the ones that get the price, the percentage off of retail.
Mhm.
You know, it doesn't make any sense.
It makes sense if the
So,
system's set up like that.
well, it does, but yeah, it's messed up. It's flawed. It's a flawed system.
It's a
You
flawed
know,
system.
and I mean, I can't speak for you, Tony. I'm not advocating for, like, you know, national socialism where, you know, everybody is just laid equal. I don't believe that that's the way to go either. I don't want to take away anybody's hard earned money. I
I
don't want to.
I
I
would
don't
say
want to
that
take it away.
no, I'm not advocating for that. And I bring this point up because not because I hate capitalism, and that's what a lot of people want to create conflict and say, well, you hate capitalism because you talked against it. No, no, no. All I'm saying is that this is a serious issue with our capitalist system, and there's solutions.
Yes, agreed.
All right.
All right.
Hey. All right, that was the show. Thanks for joining us. This was the Holographic Baldcast. And we thank you again. We're signing off.